The one with the Kips is the 5th episode of the 5th season of Friends. This is directed by Dana de Vally Piazza, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I'm going to go through my notes, which I've grouped by part of the narrative. There are two main parts of the narrative, one focusing on Chandler and Monica, one focusing on Ross and Rachel. And I'll discuss the part with Chandler and Monica first. I really love how this part of their story is progressing. And then I'll go on to Ross and Rachel, which is a little bit more emotional. Chandler and Monica are trying to steal some moments together in the middle of the night. Monica comes over to Chandler's apartment and it wakes Joey up. They almost got caught, but they found a very creative way of getting around this. And Chandler, and I love the fact that it was Chandler, suggested they go away for a weekend and just be naked the entire time. And they decide that this is what they're going to do, and Monica says that she's going to a conference in Jersey. It's a genuine conference that does exist, that she wants to go to, so it made sense that she'd say she's going to Jersey. However, Chandler also said he was going to Jersey, and I feel like in this episode there are several times where they nearly get caught, and as we find out, things take an interesting direction, but they both go away. Unfortunately, the room is not up to Monica's satisfaction. To be fair, if I went into a hotel room and there were stains on the glasses, I would also have something to say, because as she said, if they didn't change the glasses, what else didn't they change? Chandler just wants to watch this high-speed car chase, and then they move to another room, and it's a room with a garden view because all of the ocean view rooms have gone, and it's a horrible weekend. Chandler gets back, he's in a terrible mood, but as he points out, on the bright side, apparently this is a bright side for Chandler, he did get to see Donald Trump waiting in an elevator. And we think no more of it, but then Joey gets a phone call. There's a phone call at the apartment saying that an eyelash curler was left in Chandler's hotel room. And, well, Chandler has a very creative response to this. Joey thought he'd maybe just hooked up with somebody. And there we have another moment where things got very close to being revealed. Chandler then goes over to speak to Monica, and they both have very different responses to the weekend, because Chandler thinks, and he says, "So I guess this is over." And Monica points out that if you broke up with somebody every time you had a fight, you'd never have a long relationship. And then she realizes that's exactly why Chandler has never had a long relationship. And she points this out to him, and Chandler asks, "We're in a relationship?" And I think that's the moment where we have the confirmation that they're not just fooling around, that there's something much deeper and more meaningful here. And I think it's a really important moment, but not perhaps as exciting as what happens a little while later, because pretty much everybody is in Monica and Rachel's apartment, and Joey finds out that Monica also saw Donald Trump waiting for an elevator, and initially we see the cogs beginning to turn, and about 2 seconds later, Monica can't find her eyelash curler, and Joey realizes all of these things connect, and Monica and Chandler, I apologize if you can hear my cat meowing, there is a bird, I think, out the window, and Monica and Chandler realize that Joey realizes, and they basically wrestle him into Monica's bedroom, and they confess what's happened and beg him to not tell anybody. And my favourite moment is when they say this happened in London, and Joey's response, "In London? Absolutely love it." So I really like the fact that we have some serious progression with their relationship, not just finding out that they are indeed in a proper relationship and not just fooling around, but also finally somebody knows. And I can imagine it would feel a little bit like a weight off of their shoulders. For example, at the end of the episode, or towards the end of the episode, we do see them making out in Joey and Chandler's apartment. And even though Joey's not there, they can do this a little bit more freely because Joey knows. Granted, anybody else could just walk in, as they often do, but nevertheless, Joey knows, and I feel like it's maybe a little bit easier for them. So love that part of the episode. Then we have the part that's maybe not as funny, but I think very, very well done. And this is the fact that Ross is trying to tell Rachel that he can't see her. And the guys pretend they need to flip Monica's mattress. Joey has hidden a box of supplies in there after Ross said Rachel, which I thought was funny. This reflects back on an episode where Ross and Rachel were fighting and they got stuck in that room for hours. And I rather like that. It's not that often that an episode of Friends will refer back to a previous episode. I mean, the whole Emily story is constantly referring back to the wedding, but in general, it doesn't happen that often, so I rather like that. And Ross is about to tell Rachel. Unfortunately, she's received a letter saying that her dog Lapoo has died, and everybody comes out hearing her crying, and she says it's Lapoo, and Phoebe says, I know it's Lapoo now, but it'll get better, which is something that I often think of as a nice way to kind of lighten the tone of the episode a little bit, because it is quite heavy in a lot of ways, but little things like that just help to keep it a little bit lighter. Ross then tries to tell Rachel down at Central Park, but her nose starts bleeding, and he says, I can't see you anymore. And it seemed like he'd done it, he'd told her. But no, Rachel thinks he means literally he can't see her because her head is back to stop the nose bleed from dripping down her face. So, unfortunately, his second attempt wasn't very successful either. And then finally he tells her, and her initial response, and I understand this response, is, that's crazy, you can't do that. And I agree. And it takes a couple of seconds for Rachel to realise that Ross has already agreed to what Emily wants. And then Rachel storms out. And I don't disagree with that response. I don't think it was the most helpful response. But in that moment, Rachel has just found out that Ross has chosen Emily. Granted, Ross hasn't known Emily for a tremendous amount of time. Yes, they are married. Joey even points out in this episode that he thinks they got married too soon. So Ross has basically just told Rachel, I've only known Emily for however many weeks or months, but I've chosen her over you. Obviously, he didn't use those words, but that's basically what Rachel would have heard, so I can understand her reaction. And then a little while later, everybody's in Central Park, Ross goes to the bathroom, and then Rachel comes in and she says then that she's Kip. And Kip was somebody who was once phased out, and Rachel said, quite unhelpfully, that she always just thought it would be Phoebe who would be phased out. And which, to be fair, given the reasons she suggested for this, would have made the most sense. And Rachel tries to make amends by suggesting that she and Phoebe and Joey start to make a new group, and this helps us bring in a bit of comedy as well, because we have a very sweet moment in Central Park between Ross and Rachel, and Ross says, and I really admire him for this, he said that he's the one who's made this decision, so it should be him who backs out of the group. He won't spend time with them anymore because that's only fair, and I really appreciate him for doing that. And Rachel says, quite movingly actually, no, that's not better. I still don't get to see you. And Ross asks Rachel what she would do in this situation. And of course, she doesn't have an answer. And then Joey comes in saying that Phoebe told him Rachel wanted to talk to him about a trip or something. And it was a nice way to put some comedy in there to make things quite lighthearted. And I think they got the balance there pretty spot on. It's a pretty brilliant episode. I think we get some progress with both parts, with Ross and his marriage and Monica and Chandler. And there are some very interesting things to come. It's a very moving episode. There's a lot of comedy in this. The balance is brilliant. I definitely think that it's a really strong episode. The one with the Kips, it's pretty brilliant.